Dear students, in lecture number 52, we discussed lakes, their origin and diversity. Today, we shall be dealing with lakes, their distribution and classification. In this very lecture, we shall be discussing the classification proposed by Forel 1901, which was later modified by Whipple 1927, wherein the lakes were classified on the basis of the surface temperature and the temperature of bottom water. And we shall also be discussing the classification proposed by Yoshimura 1936. Before proceeding, it is my request to you all to like and subscribe my channel Biolearnia. Now, first of all, before moving on to the classification, let us have a little bit of recap that what lakes are. The lakes are naturally formed from hollows or depressions on the surface of Earth, which get filled with water, occupying a basin and lacking continuity with sea. So there are many things in it. Many a times they are naturally formed from the hollows or depressions in the Earth's surface, which get filled with water, occupying a basin, and they lack continuity with sea. That is, they don't have the continuity with sea. And this very definition was proposed by Forel in 1892. And according to Mutowski 1918, lake has been defined as a body of standing water which are of considerable expanse and deep enough to stratify thermally. So according to Mutowski, lake is defined as a body of standing water which is large enough and deep enough to stratify thermally. That is, the thermal stratification is found in the lakes. That is, they are so much deep that thermal stratification can be found. But one of the classical definitions which we used to study was that lake has also been defined as a body of standing water. Now, point number one, defined as a body of standing water completely isolated from the sea, having an area of relatively deep water and sufficiently large enough to produce somewhere in periphery a wave-swept shore. That is, 3 points here need to be remembered. That is, it is a large body of standing water. It is completely isolated from sea. It is having an area of relatively deep water, which has the capability to produce a wave-swept shore. So, Mutowski said that the lake should be deep enough to stratify thermally, but in this very definition, it is that it should be able to produce somewhere in periphery a wave-swept shore. So, all these definitions of the lakes are treated to be true. Then, Welch in 1952, he regards all the large bodies of standing water as lakes. That is, whatsoever bodies of the standing water are present on Earth, they are regarded as the lakes. But now you will say that, okay, then what is a pond? Now herein there is a little bit of difference. That according to Welch, the large bodies of the standing water, they are regarded as lakes, but the ponds are different from the lakes. And the ponds, which according to him are very small, so in comparison to the lakes, the ponds are very small. They are shallow bodies of quite standing water, that is quite standing water, in which extensive occupancy of the higher aquatic plants is a common characteristic. Now, we have to keep in mind that Welch in 1952, he regards all the large water bodies of standing water as lakes, but this definition eliminates the ponds. Now why it eliminates ponds? Because according to him, the ponds are very small shallow bodies. They are quiet standing water. They are having the quiet standing water which have the extensive occupancy of the higher aquatic plants. So ponds differ from the lakes in having the higher occupancy of aquatic plants. Now, how reservoirs differ from the lake? Now, again a question, that how reservoirs differ from a lake. Can reservoirs be called as the lakes? No. A reservoir differs from a lake in that the reservoir is artificially created. So the difference between the reservoir, the first difference between the reservoir and a lake is that reservoir differ from the lake because they are artificially created by putting across a stream an earthen stone masonry or concrete bandh or dam. So when a concrete bandh, earthen stone masonry is put across a stream or a river to collect the water, it becomes a reservoir. And reservoirs are formed mainly for the irrigation, power generation, flood control, recreation, fishery development, and for many more purposes. Now, let us come on to the topic of today, that is classification of lakes. Forel in 1901, he was the first to propose a generally accepted classification of lakes of the world. So he classified the lakes of the world into polar, temperate and tropical lakes on the basis of thermal characteristics, that is on the basis of temperature. He classified all the lakes of the world into three, that is polar, temperate and tropical lakes. But this very classification was later modified by Whipple in 1927, who subdivided these very lakes, that is these three lakes, who subdivided these three lakes into three orders depending on the temperature of the surface and bottom waters in different seasons of a year and annual circulation pattern. Now, the Forel 1901, he proposed the classification of the lakes of the world into three types or three categories, that is polar, temperate and tropical. Now on the basis of the thermal characteristics, that is on the basis of temperature. But later on, Whipple 1927, he subdivided lakes into three orders. Now how they were divided into orders, they were based on the temperature of the surface and bottom water, number one, the temperature of the surface and bottom water, and number two, annual circulation pattern, that is how the water circulates in the lakes in annually or in a year. So the lakes of the world, according to the classification of the Forel as modified by Whipple, are grouped into polar lakes, temperate lakes and tropical lakes. Now, what are polar lakes according to the Forel and modified by the Whipple? Now, polar lakes where surface temperature never exceeds 4 degrees centigrade. This is the first clear cut definition or the classification of a polar lake. That is what polar lake is, where the surface temperature never exceeds 4 degrees centigrade. Now, order 1, polar lakes of order 1. So bottom temperature at 4 degrees centigrade throughout the year and one circulation period possible in summer. Now keep in mind that the polar lakes of order 1, they have the bottom water at 4 degrees centigrade throughout the year and one circulation is possible, and that too in the month of the that is summer months. Now, polar lake of order 2, temperature of the bottom water varies but not far from 4 degrees centigrade and 1 circulation period in summer. So, in the second order, temperature of bottom water varies but not far from the 4 degrees centigrade. That is, there is little bit of variation from the 4 degrees centigrade, but only 1 circulation period, that is in summer. Now, order number 3. Temperature of the bottom water very similar to that of the surface circulation, more or less continuous except when frozen. So the polar lakes of order 3, wherein temperature of the bottom water is very much similar to that of the surface water. That it means temperature of the bottom and the surface is almost similar and more or less continuous except when it is frozen. So this was the polar lake. Now moving on to the second lake, that is temperate lake. Here in this very temperate lake, surface temperature vary above and below 4 degrees centigrade. So those lakes wherein temperature varies, that is the surface temperature varies above and below 4 degrees centigrade, we categorize them as the temperate lakes. So these lakes lie between the polar regions and Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. So if we talk about these very temperate zones, so the area between the Arctic Circle and the Tropic of Cancer, this area is regarded as the temperate zone, and the zone which lies between the Arctic zone and the Tropic of Capricorn, we call this zone as the temperate zone. So between the polar and the Tropic of Capricorn, the region between the polar and the Tropic of Cancer, we categorize such lakes as the temperate lakes. Now the temperate lakes of order 1, what are those very lakes? The temperature of the bottom water at 4 degrees centigrade throughout the year. So bottom temperature is 4 degrees centigrade throughout the year. Two circulation periods are possible, one in spring and other in autumn. So we call such lakes wherein the two mixings or the two circulations are possible, that is spring our turn and autumn our turn. And the order 2, the temperature of the bottom water varies but not far from 4 degrees centigrade. That is, it varies but not far from the 4 degrees centigrade. Two circulations, one in spring and other in autumn, are possible. In the order 1, 4 degrees centigrade throughout the year. In the order 2, temperature of the bottom water varies but not far from 4 degrees centigrade. And in the order 1 and order 2, two circulations are possible, one in spring and one in autumn. Order 3, temperature of the bottom water is very similar to that of the surface water and circulation continuous except when frozen. So in this very case, temperature of bottom water is very much similar to that of the surface water, and the circulation is continuous except the seasons when it is frozen. So the order 1, order 2 and order 3 lakes are present in the temperate lakes as well. Now the tropical lakes. Here in this very lakes, the surface temperature is always above 4 degrees centigrade, always above 4 degrees centigrade. So this very zone of the globe, this is the tropical zone. That is zone which is near to that of the equator. Here in these very regions, the surface temperature of the water is always above 4 degrees centigrade. Now let us talk a little bit about the order 1, order 2 and order 3 of the tropical lakes. Order 1 lakes, that is temperature of the bottom water, it is near 4 degrees centigrade for the year, and one circulation period is possible, that is in winter. So 4 degrees centigrade, near 4 degrees centigrade all through the year, one circulation period, that is in winter, they are order 1, that is order 1 lakes. Then order 2, temperature of the bottom water varies but not far from 4 degrees centigrade, one circulation period, that is in winter. So in the first case 4 degrees centigrade, near 4 degrees centigrade, and in the order 2 it varies but not far from 4 degrees centigrade, and in both the cases only one circulation is possible, that is in winter. And order 3, temperature of the bottom water, it is very similar to surface water and it is particularly continuous throughout the year. So in the order 3 lakes of the tropical zone of the tropical lakes, the temperature of the bottom water is very similar to that of the surface water and particularly the continuous throughout the year. And then recent limnological investigations have shown that the characteristic of the Forel's tropical type of the lakes, they are far too broad, resulting in clumping together of the divergent lakes. And then later on, Yoshimura 1936 improved upon the Forel's classification and recognized lakes into 5 types that we shall be discussing. So, according to the classification by Yoshimura 1936, he improved upon the Forel's classification and recognized lakes into 5 types. Now, what are those very types? They are tropical lakes, subtropical lakes, temperate lakes, subpolar lakes, and polar lakes. Now, what is different? So, these very lakes, that is subtropical lakes and the subpolar lakes, were missing in the classification proposed by the Forel and later modified by Whipple 1927. So in the classification proposed by the Yoshimura 1936, the lakes are tropical, subtropical, temperate, subpolar, and polar lakes. Now let us have a little bit of idea about what these lakes are. So the tropical lakes, according to the Yoshimura, surface temperature is 20 degrees centigrade to 30 degrees centigrade with a small amplitude of variation, small thermal gradient at any depth, and circulation is irregular. Circulation is irregular, but usually during the coldest time of the year. So we regard these very tropical lakes, that is those very lakes which are near to that of the equator. That is surface temperature, it is 20 degrees centigrade to 30 degrees centigrade, a small amplitude of variation, small thermal gradient, circulation irregular, and if present, it is usually during the coldest time of the year. Number 2, subtropical lakes. Surface temperature never below 4 degrees centigrade, that is always above 4 degrees centigrade. Annual variation is large, thermal gradient is large, and one circulation period is possible, and that is in winter, and it is the Forel's tropical lake. So Forel's tropical lake here is subtropical lake. Now temperate lake. In the temperate lake, surface temperature, it is above 4 degrees centigrade in summer and below 4 degrees centigrade in winters. So in summers, it is surface temperature is above 4 degrees centigrade, and in winters, it is below 4 degrees centigrade. Thermal gradient is large and seasonal variation is large. 2 circulation period here, you have to keep in mind that 2 circulation periods are possible, one in spring and other in late autumn. So herein the spring overturn and autumn overturn can be present. Now, one more important thing, I always tell you the thermal gradient. So it means that the variation from the epilimnion toward the hypolimnion with a variation in the this very metalimnion. So this is the gradient, that how much change is there in the temperature from the surface towards the bottom. Now the fourth lake, that is subpolar lake. Here in these very lakes, that is subpolar lakes, that is not in the polar region, just below the polar regions. So surface temperature, it is above 4 degrees centigrade only for a short period, and that too in summer. Thermal gradient is small, Two circulation periods, that is summer and early autumn, are possible, but temporary cooling throughout the summer permits the frequent mixing. So in these very subpolar lakes, surface temperature above 4 degrees centigrade can be present, but only for a short period of time. Thermal gradient is small and two circulation periods are present, and that is early summer, and early autumn. But temporary cooling can be present throughout the summer, which permits the frequent mixing as well. Then polar lakes. In the polar lakes, that is those lakes which are in the polar region, this extreme, that is blue one, they are the polar. So polar in the polar lakes, surface temperature is 4 degrees centigrade. Ice free period is very small. It means that they are almost frozen throughout the year, with a very short window period wherein they remain unfrozen. So very short circulation only at the peak of the summer. So if the circulation is present, and that is for a very short period, and that too in the peak of the summer. So this was all about the classification of the lakes as proposed by Forel in 1901 and later on modified by Wetzel in 1927, wherein they classified the lakes on the basis of the surface and the bottom temperature, and then later on Whipple modified them into orders based on the surface and the bottom temperature and the circulation pattern. And later on the Yoshimura 1936, he divided lakes into 5 types. So this was all we discussed today. Next we shall be discussing the classification of the lakes based on the trophic levels, and we shall also be discussing the classification of the lakes based on the mixing cycles of the water. So that was all for today. Thank you very much.